On the first night of 1998, two young New Zealanders stepped onto a yacht and disappeared into the Marlborough Sounds. No bodies, no wreckage, no goodbye. Just silence that stretched into years. A man was convicted of their murder, despite a boat that didn't match, witnesses who changed their minds, and evidence that raised more questions than answers. 26 years later, families still wait for remains. A nation still asks, was justice served or was someone chosen to fill the void? Some mysteries refuse to stay buried. This one refuses to be solved. The night begins like so many others. Young voices rising above music, lights dancing across dark water, the hum of celebration threading through a crowded bay. Furneaux Lodge sits at the edge of the Marlborough Sounds, a gathering point for boats and bodies seeking escape from ordinary life. It is New Year's Eve, and the air carries the electric anticipation of midnight approaching. Ben Smart arrives with friends, his laughter easy, his posture relaxed. At 21, he moves through the world with the confidence of someone who has not yet learned to fear it. He wears casual clothes, shorts, a shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and carries himself with the effortless belonging of someone comfortable in his own skin. Olivia Hope enters separately, surrounded by her group. 17 years old, she radiates warmth. Her eyes reflect excitement, curiosity, the unguarded joy of youth experiencing freedom. She smiles frequently. Her friends stay close, their energy feeding off one another in that particular rhythm of teenage connection. The bay sprawls before them, hundreds of boats anchored in clusters, their masts swaying gently, their hulls reflecting strings of lights stretched between vessels. Some boats host parties of their own. Music competes with music. Strangers become temporary companions. The lodge itself overflows with people. The deck packed, the bar busy, the atmosphere charged with collective release. Ben and Olivia do not arrive together, but their paths will cross as the night deepens. For now, they exist in separate orbits, moving through the same crowded space, breathing the same summer air, unaware that their fates are about to intertwine in ways neither can imagine. The water remains calm. The stars appear one by one as darkness settles. Somewhere in the distance, a boat engine hums briefly, then fades. The night expands, pulling everyone deeper into its warm embrace. Olivia checks her arrangements aboard the Tamarack, a yacht where she and friends have reserved sleeping berths. The boat sits anchored among dozens of others, its deck quiet compared to the lodge. She climbs aboard briefly, confirming the space, noting the bunks already claimed by others in her group. The plan is simple. Return later, sleep, wake to the first day of a new year. Men also expects to sleep on the Tamarack. The arrangement was made casually, the way plans often form among young people moving through summer with minimal structure. He trusts that space will be available when the time comes. The night air cools slightly as the clock moves closer to midnight. The temperature remains mild, but the warmth of the day has dissipated. People begin layering jackets over their shoulders, wrapping arms around themselves during quieter moments between dancing. Olivia returns to the lodge. The crowd has thickened. Bodies pressed together near the waterfront, anticipation building as the final minutes of 1997 tick away. Voices rise in scattered countdowns, some jumping ahead, others lagging behind, creating a chaotic symphony of overlapping numbers. Ben stands near the edge of the deck, watching the water. He sips a drink, exchanges words with a stranger beside him. The stranger laughs at something Ben says. The moment is unremarkable, ordinary, the kind of interaction that happens thousands of times on nights like this. The Tamarack remains visible from the lodge, its outline dark against the slightly lighter sky. Olivia glances toward it once, then turns back to her friends. Her smile remains constant, her energy does not waver. Midnight approaches, the anticipation becomes physical. A tightening in the collective chest of the crowd, a held breath waiting for release. The clock strikes 12, the bay erupts. Fireworks explode overhead, brilliant reds, greens, golds, casting shifting light across the water. The reflections fracture into thousands of moving pieces, the surface transforming into liquid color. Cheers rise from every direction. Strangers embrace. Couples kiss. Friends clink glasses, bottles, whatever they hold in their hands. Ben raises his drink toward the sky. His face catches the light of a descending spark, his expression open, unguarded. He is part of the collective joy, absorbed into the moment completely. Olivia stands with her group, her arms raised, her voice joining the chorus of celebration. Her friends surround her, their faces illuminated in flashes, their laughter blending into the larger roar. For this brief window, individual identity dissolves into shared experience. The fireworks continue for several minutes, each burst greeted with fresh applause. The sounds themselves seem to amplify the noise, the hills catching and returning echoes, creating layers of sound that wash over the boats and the shore. When the final spark fades, the crowd does not disperse. Music resumes, louder now, more insistent. Bodies move again. The celebration shifts from anticipation to full immersion. Hours stretch ahead, the night still young despite the calendar turning. Ben dances briefly, his movements loose and unself-conscious. He speaks to someone new, then another. His path through the crowd is meandering, dictated by impulse rather than plan. Olivia remains with her friends, though the group's composition shifts as people drift away and return. She talks, laughs, moves to the music. Her energy remains high. Nothing in her behavior suggests concern or discomfort. The boats in the bay rock gently, their anchors holding against the mild current. The water reflects the lodge lights in long, wavering lines. The night settles into its new rhythm. Post-midnight freedom, the sense that anything is possible because the year is fresh and the world feels open. The celebration will continue for hours, but already unseen, the story has begun its fracture. The sky begins to lighten, not into full dawn, but into that pre-dawn gray where shapes become distinguishable but details remain obscured. The crowd has thinned. Some have retreated to their boats, others have found corners to sit, their voices lower now, fatigue beginning to show. Ben and Olivia return to the Tamarack around 4 a.m. They climb aboard, their steps careful on the damp deck. Below, they find the sleeping berths already occupied. Friends lie sprawled across the available space, some still dressed, others having stripped down to minimal clothing. The air below deck is warm, close, carrying the mingled scents of bodies and alcohol. There is no room. Ben and Olivia exchange glances. No anger, no panic. Just mild frustration mixed with the hazy acceptance that comes with exhaustion. They return to the deck. The bay stretches before them, still dotted with boats, though many are dark now, their occupants asleep. The problem is practical. They need somewhere to sleep, but the bay is too crowded to easily navigate to another option. The lodge is too loud. The shore offers no comfort. They stand on the deck, considering options, their conversation quiet. A water taxi engine hums in the distance, growing closer. The sound cuts through the ambient noise of water lapping against hulls, and distant music still playing from some vessel unwilling to surrender the night. Guy Wallace navigates his water taxi through the bay, his movements practiced, efficient. He has been running passengers all night, exhausted revelers needing transport between boats, people who misjudge distances or change their plans. His face shows the wear of hours without rest, but his focus remains sharp. Ben and Olivia wave him down. Wallace slows, steering closer to the Tamarack. They climb aboard, explaining their situation. Wallace nods. He has heard similar stories all night. The bay is overcrowded, berths are scarce, and people are improvising solutions. Others are already in the water taxi. Among them sits a man Wallace will later describe in detail. Scruffy appearance, short dark wavy hair, wiry build, possible tattoos on his arms. The man sits quietly, not engaging much with the other passengers. His clothes are casual, worn. He watches the water as the taxi moves. The stranger's presence registers with Wallace but does not alarm him. The night has been full of strangers. This one seems no different. The water taxi cuts through the bay, its wake spreading in gentle V-shapes behind. The engine's hum is steady, almost soothing. Passengers sit in tired silence, the energy of midnight long depleted. The air smells of salt and fuel. Ben and Olivia sit near the back. Their conversation is minimal now, exhaustion settling into their limbs, their eyes heavy. The movement of the boat rocks them gently. Wallace steers with one hand, occasionally glancing back to check his passengers. The scruffy man sits near the middle, his posture relaxed but attentive. He speaks only when necessary, his voice low when he does. As they move deeper into the bay, the stranger directs Wallace. He points toward a section where boats are anchored more sparsely, away from the main cluster near the lodge. Wallace adjusts his course, following the direction indicated. The yacht comes into view, a two-masted wooden ketch, its dark hull visible even in the dim light. A blue stripe runs along its side. Portholes punctuate the hull at regular intervals, though no light shines from within. The boat sits quietly, rocking slightly, with the water's movement. Wallace approaches carefully, his experience guiding him through the tight maneuvering required. He brings the taxi alongside the ketch. The stranger stands first, moving with practiced ease. He steps onto the yacht's deck, his balance steady. Ben and Olivia follow. They climb across, their movement slower, less certain. The stranger extends a hand to Olivia, steadying her as she crosses. She thanks him quietly. Ben follows without assistance. Wallace watches briefly as the three figures disappear into the yacht's darker interior. He does not linger. Other passengers wait. Other runs need completing. He pulls away, the Wataxi's engine resuming its steady rhythm. The ketch remains anchored, silent now, indistinguishable from dozens of other boats scattered across the bay. The water around it moves gently, reflecting nothing. This is the last confirmed sighting of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. Wallace continues his work, unaware that the passengers he just delivered have crossed an invisible threshold. The night continues around them, music still playing somewhere, voices still audible in the distance. But Ben and Olivia have stepped out of the recorded world. The bay absorbs them, the darkness holds them, and when the sun rises, they will not emerge. Dawn breaks slowly over the Marlborough Sounds. The sky shifts from black to deep blue to pale gray. Lights seeping across the water in gradual layers. The bay wakes incrementally. A boat engine starting here, a figure moving on a deck there, the first stirrings of a day after celebration. Most vessels remain quiet. Inside their hulls, people sleep off the night's successes, their bodies sprawled in awkward positions, their minds still submerged in alcohol-fogged dreams. The water is calm, almost glassy, reflecting the growing light in soft, diffused tones. Guy Wallace ties up his water taxi as the sun fully crests the hills. His shift has ended. He moves stiffly, his body protesting the hours of repetitive motion. He does not think about the passengers he transported. They blur together. Dozens of faces, voices, requests, none particularly memorable. The ketch with the blue stripe remains anchored in its position. No movement is visible on deck. No smoke rises from below. The boat sits as it did hours earlier, indistinguishable from the sleeping vessels around it. At Furneaux Lodge, cleanup begins. Staff move through debris, plastic cups, discarded bottles, scattered clothing forgotten in the chaos of celebration. They work methodically, restoring order to the disrupted space. Some early risers sit on the deck with coffee, squinting against the brightening light, speaking in low voices. The Tamarac's occupants begin stirring. Friends wake, stretch, exchange groggy greetings. Someone mentions Ben and Olivia. Another person shrugs. Maybe they found another boat. Maybe they went back to shore. The concern is minimal. People often separate during long nights, regrouping later when everyone is more clear-headed. The bay continues its slow awakening. Birds call from the hills. A breeze picks up, ruffling the water's surface, creating small waves that lap against hulls. The temperature rises as the sun climbs higher. No one knows that two people are missing. The world has shifted, but the shift is invisible, silent, unregistered by anyone present. The story has already broken, but the fracture has not yet been seen. The morning proceeds normally. The day ahead promises warmth, recovery, the slow return to routine after celebration. But Ben Smart and Olivia Hope do not return. They do not call out from any deck. They do not appear on any shore. They had vanished. 48 hours pass before alarm becomes official. The friends aboard the Tamarack grow concerned first. Ben and Olivia's absence stretches beyond plausible explanation. Calls go unanswered. Inquiries at the lodge yield nothing. No one remembers seeing them after the early morning hours of New Year's Day. Parents receive calls. Initial reassurances, maybe they stayed with other friends, maybe they extended their trip, give way to growing unease. Ben's parents contact authorities. Olivia's family does the same. The police response begins routinely. Missing persons reports are filed. Descriptions are recorded. Young people often lose track of time during holiday celebrations. Most return within hours of being reported missing, sheepish and apologetic. But hours pass without contact. The routine response escalates. Detective Inspector Rob Pope receives the case assignment. He is methodical, experienced, accustomed to pressure. He reviews the initial reports, noting the timeline, the location, the last known sightings. His expression remains neutral, but his mind catalogs the concerning elements. 2 people, not 1. No contact from either. No belongings recovered. He mobilizes resources quickly. The operation receives a name, Operation TAM. Officers fan out across the sounds, interviewing boat owners, checking registrations, compiling witness statements. The lodge staff are questioned extensively. Every water taxi driver operating that night is located and interviewed. Guy Wallace remembers the run. When pressed, details emerge. The scruffy man with short, dark, wavy hair, the wiry build, possible arm tattoos. The yacht, wooden, 2-masted, a ketch, with a blue stripe and portholes. He dropped 3 passengers there. The man, the young male, the young female. This becomes the investigative anchor. Police circulate the description. Media outlets pick up the story. Headlines shift from missing persons to potential foul play. The public begins paying attention. Searches intensify. Boats are inspected. Divers enter the water, checking beneath anchored vessels, scanning the bottom for anything unusual. Aircraft fly overhead, eyes scanning for debris, bodies, any sign of disturbance. Nothing surfaces. The bay, so crowded on New Year's Eve, now feels vast and impenetrable. The water keeps its secrets. The hundreds of boats that filled the sounds have dispersed. Their occupants return to their lives, scattered across the country. Pope convenes his team. The investigation shifts from search to inquiry. If Ben and Olivia went onto that yacht, what happened next? Where is the yacht now? Who was the scruffy man? The questions multiply faster than answers. The case, already days old, begins its transformation into something larger, more complex, more public. Families wait by phones, media camps outside police headquarters, the nation begins watching. And somewhere, unseen, the truth remains hidden, buried in water, memory, or silence. The description of the mystery man becomes the investigation's focal point. Police compile witness statements, cross-referencing details, searching for consistency. Guy Wallace's account is detailed, but not unique. Others remember seeing a scruffy individual that night, though descriptions vary in small ways. Hair color ranges from dark brown to black. Height estimates shift by inches. The tattoos remain uncertain, possible, probable, but not confirmed. Sketch artists work with Wallace and other witnesses. An image emerges. Lean face, sharp features, unkempt hair, guarded expression. The sketch circulates through newspapers and television broadcasts. Tips flood in. Hundreds of calls from people claiming to recognize the man, each requiring follow-up, verification, elimination. Pope assigns teams to track every lead. Officers work long hours, their focus narrowing as less promising tips are discarded. The investigation develops a rhythm. Gather information, verify, eliminate, repeat. The 2-masted ketch becomes equally crucial. Police canvass marinas, harbors, anchorages across the Marlborough region and beyond. Boat registrations are checked. Owners are interviewed. Any vessel matching the description, wooden, 2 masts, blue stripe, portholes, receives intense scrutiny. But none fit perfectly. Some have blue stripes but are single-masted. Others are 2-masted but steel, not wood. The combination of features remains elusive. Investigators begin questioning whether the boat still exists, whether it has been disguised, repainted, or sunk. Public interest intensifies. The case dominates news cycles. Families appear on television pleading for information. Ben's mother speaks quietly, her voice breaking. Olivia's father, Gerald Hope, maintains composure, but his eyes reveal the erosion happening behind his controlled exterior. The community responds with sympathy and speculation. Theories proliferate. An accident, a robbery gone wrong, an abduction. Some whisper about organized crime. Others suggest international trafficking. The absence of evidence allows imagination to fill the void. Pope remains focused on the tangible. He does not indulge speculation. His approach is procedural, systematic. He believes the mystery man exists. He believes the yacht exists. He believes that somewhere in the mass of information being gathered, the truth is waiting to be uncovered. Weeks pass. The initial surge of tips slows. The investigation enters a more grinding phase, reviewing old statements, re-interviewing witnesses, searching for inconsistencies or overlooked details. And then a name surfaces. Not from a tip, but from background checks and cross-referencing. A man who was in the bay that night. A man with a boat. A man with a criminal history. Scott Watson. The name is added to the list of persons of interest. Officers begin pulling records, building a profile. Watson owns a boat called Blade, a sloop, single-masted, steel-hulled. It does not match the witness descriptions. But it was there that night, anchored in the bay. Pope's attention shifts. The investigation narrows its lens. The mystery man has a potential identity. The question now is whether the identity fits the crime. Scott Watson enters the investigation reluctantly, pulled in by proximity and history. His past includes convictions, burglary, violence, offenses that mark him in police records as someone worth watching. He is 27 years old, lean, guarded, with a manner that oscillates between defiance and withdrawal. His boat, Blade, sits anchored in the investigative net now. Officers inspect it thoroughly. The vessel is compact, functional, designed for solo sailing. Its single mast rises plainly. Its steel hull shows no blue stripe. No portholes punctuate its sides. It bears no resemblance to the ketch described by Guy Wallace. Yes, Pope's team does not dismiss it. Descriptions can be wrong. Memory is unreliable, especially after alcohol and hours of darkness. Perhaps the witnesses conflated details from multiple boats. Perhaps the lighting distorted what they saw. Watson is brought in for questioning. He sits across from detectives in a small, fluorescent-lit room. His posture is defensive, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes moving between faces without settling. He confirms he was in the bay on New Year's Eve. He confirms he was alone on Blade. He denies taking any passengers aboard. He denies knowing Ben Smart or Olivia Hope. The detectives press. They ask about his movements that night, who he spoke with, whether anyone came near his boat. Watson's answers are clipped, minimal. He offers no more information than directly asked for. His demeanor does not suggest cooperation or guilt, only a man who has learned to distrust authority. Guy Wallace is brought back for further questioning. Police show him Watson's photograph. Initially, Wallace expresses uncertainty. The face looks similar, perhaps, but he cannot be certain. The night was dark. His focus was on navigation, not memorizing passengers. Days later, Wallace is shown another photo. This time, a photo that has been digitally manipulated to show Watson blinking. The technique is meant to simulate the natural movement of a face, to trigger recognition. Wallace studies it. His uncertainty lessens. He tells police the resemblance is stronger. He believes this could be the man. The identification is not definitive, but it is enough to deepen suspicion. Pope authorizes a more invasive search. Blade is seized and transported to a police facility. Forensic teams descend on it, dismantling sections, collecting samples, photographing every surface. They work methodically, aware that this boat may hold the only physical evidence linking Watson to the missing couple. The search yields hair, approximately 390 strands collected from various surfaces, concentrated on a blanket found aboard. The hairs are sent for analysis. Forensic specialists compare them to reference samples taken from Olivia Hope's hairbrush. 2 hairs are identified as a mitochondrial DNA match to Olivia. The discovery shifts the investigation's trajectory. Physical evidence now connects Olivia Hope to Scott Watson's boat. The circumstantial web tightens. Hope briefs his superiors. The case is moving toward arrest. The public waits. Families hold their breath. The forensic findings become the centerpiece of the prosecution's developing case. The 2 hairs matching Olivia's mitochondrial DNA are presented as irrefutable proof that she was aboard Blade. The likelihood of such a match occurring randomly is calculated as astronomically low. The science, prosecutors will later argue, does not lie. But the defense will challenge everything about those hairs. They will point to the handling procedures. The reference hairs taken from Olivia's hairbrush were processed in the same laboratory on the same day as the hairs collected from Blade. The bag containing the reference sample had a small slit in it. Could cross-contamination have occurred? Could a single stray hair from the reference sample have transferred to the evidence collected from the boat? The forensic team denies this possibility. They describe their protocols, their care, their separation of samples. They maintain the integrity of the evidence. But doubt, once introduced, is difficult to erase completely. The investigation also uncovers inconsistencies in witness memory. Several people who were in the bay that night are re-interviewed. Some recall seeing a scruffy man, others do not. Some remember a two-masted ketch, others remember different vessels entirely. Memory, investigators learn, is not a recording, it is a reconstruction, shaped by suggestion, time, and repetition. One witness initially describes the mystery man as having long hair. Later, after seeing media reports and police sketches, the same witness revises the description to short hair. Another witness, who was uncertain at first, becomes more confident after multiple interviews, as if repetition has solidified what was initially vague. Pope remains convinced. He has seen cases built on less. The hairs are physical evidence. Watson was in the bay. He has a violent history. The pieces fit, even if some edges remain rough. The decision is made. Arrest warrants are prepared. On a cold morning, officers arrive at Watson's address. He is taken into custody without resistance. His expression shows no surprise, only resignation, as if he has been expecting this moment since the investigation began. He is charged with 2 counts of murder, the murder of Ben Smart and the murder of Olivia Hope. No bodies have been recovered. No eyewitnesses have come forward claiming to have seen violence. No weapon has been found. The case rests entirely on circumstantial evidence: the hair, the evolving witness identifications, the opportunity. Media coverage explodes. The nation watches as Watson is led into court for his first appearance. Photographers capture his face, stoic, unreadable, framed by officers on either side. Headlines scream certainty. Killer caught. Mystery man identified. Justice for Ben and Olivia. But in quieter spaces, doubt whispers. Defense attorneys begin preparing. Families brace for a trial, and the Marlborough Sounds remain silent, holding whatever truth lies beneath their surface. The case moves toward courtroom confrontation. The question is no longer whether someone will be held accountable. The question is whether the right person is standing accused. The High Court trial begins under Justice Dick Heron's steady gaze. The courtroom is packed. Journalists, family members, curious citizens who have followed the case since Ben and Olivia's disappearance. The atmosphere is tense, charged with expectation. Outside, television crews broadcast live updates. Inside, the legal machinery begins its slow, methodical process. The Crown's case is led by experienced prosecutors who present their narrative with confidence. They call nearly 488 witnesses over the course of the trial, an extraordinary number reflecting the complexity and public scrutiny surrounding the case. Each witness adds a piece to the puzzle the Crown is assembling. Watson was the mystery man. He lured Ben and Olivia onto Blade, he killed them, and he disposed of their bodies at sea. The forensic evidence is presented early. The hairs are displayed, their significance explained in scientific detail. Experts testify about mitochondrial DNA, probability calculations, the unlikelihood of error. The jury listens intently, some taking notes, others simply watching the expert's face as they speak. Guy Wallace takes the stand. He describes the water taxi run in detail, the passengers, the direction, the yacht he approached. Prosecutors ask him about the man he saw. Wallace looks across the courtroom toward Watson. He nods. He identifies him. The blink photo is introduced, its use explained. Wallace confirms it helped solidify his memory. The Crown argues that Wallace's identification, combined with the physical evidence, creates a clear picture. Watson invited the couple aboard under the pretense of offering them a place to sleep. Once aboard, he attacked them. Their bodies were weighted and thrown into the Sounds, where the depth and currents ensured they would never be found. The prosecution acknowledges the lack of bodies. They cite precedent, other cases where murder convictions were obtained without recovered remains. The evidence, they argue, is strong enough to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Public reaction is divided. Some see the case as straightforward. Watson had opportunity. He was identified, and physical evidence places Olivia on his boat. Others see troubling gaps, the boat description mismatch, the contamination concerns, the absence of any direct evidence of violence. Ben's family sits in the gallery every day, their faces drawn, their presence a silent weight. Olivia's father, Gerald Hope, attends regularly. His expression is controlled, but his hands sometimes clench in his lap during particularly difficult testimony. The defense has not yet begun its case, but already the courtroom feels divided, not just between prosecution and defense, but between competing narratives of what truth looks like when evidence is incomplete and memory is uncertain. Justice Heron maintains order with quiet authority. He rules on objections, clarifies points of law, ensures the process remains fair. But even he cannot resolve the fundamental tension. The jury must decide guilt or innocence based on circumstantial threads rather than definitive proof. The trial will continue for weeks. Witnesses will be cross-examined, evidence will be contested, and at the end, 12 people will be asked to render a verdict that will shape how this story is remembered. The defense opens with a direct challenge to the foundation of the Crown's case. Scott Watson's lawyers argue that the evidence is not proof, it is interpretation, shaped by investigative pressure and confirmation bias. They call 26 witnesses, each chosen to introduce doubt, to highlight inconsistencies, to suggest alternative explanations. The boat description becomes a primary battleground. Witness after witness described a two-masted wooden ketch, with portholes and a blue stripe. Blade is none of these things. The defense presents photographs of Blade alongside the witness descriptions. The contrast is stark. How, they ask the jury, can Watson be the mystery man if the boat doesn't match? The Crown counters that memory is fallible, especially under conditions of darkness, alcohol, and stress. Perhaps witnesses saw other boats and conflated details. Perhaps the lighting distorted their perception. But the defense presses, not one witness, but multiple witnesses, all describing similar features that Blade does not possess. The hair evidence is attacked methodically. Defense experts testify about contamination risks in forensic laboratories. They describe how easily a single hair can transfer between samples, especially when processed in proximity. The slit in the reference sample bag is emphasized. Could a hair have escaped? Could it have found its way into the evidence collected from Blade? The Crown's forensic experts are recalled, forced to defend their procedures under intense cross-examination. They maintain that protocols were followed, that contamination did not occur, but the defense has planted the seed. What if? Guy Wallace's identification is dissected. The defense highlights his initial uncertainty. They question the use of the blink photo, suggesting it influenced his memory rather than clarifying it. They note that Wallace's confidence grew over time, through repeated interviews, through exposure to Watson's image in media coverage. Is his identification genuine memory, or is it reconstructed certainty? Wallace remains steady under questioning. He insists he recognized Watson, but his initial hesitation is on the record, impossible to erase. The defense also presents character witnesses, people who describe Watson as a loner, yes, but not violent toward strangers. His past convictions involved property and fights, not predatory behavior. The leap from burglary to double murder is portrayed as implausible without additional evidence. Watson himself does not testify. His lawyers advise against it, wary of how his demeanor might be perceived, how his criminal history might be used against him. His silence is noted by some observers as suspicious, by others as legally prudent. The courtroom atmosphere shifts as the defense case unfolds. Certainty erodes slightly. The clean narrative presented by the Crown develops cracks. Reasonable doubt, the standard required for acquittal, begins to feel possible. But the Crown has the final word. In closing arguments, prosecutors remind the jury of the physical evidence. They remind them of Wallace's identification. They remind them that two young people vanished after boarding a boat, and that boat belonged to the man sitting before them. They ask the jury to consider the totality of the evidence, not individual pieces in isolation. They argue that circumstantial evidence can be powerful, that threads woven together create a rope strong enough to hold. The defense counters in their closing, doubt should lead to acquittal. If the jury is uncertain, they must vote not guilty. The burden of proof rests entirely on the Crown. Justice Heron provides his instructions. He explains the law, the standard of proof, the jury's responsibilities. His tone is neutral, careful. He reminds them that their decision will affect lives. The families waiting for justice, the man whose freedom hangs in balance. The jury retires to deliberate. Days pass. The jury remains sequestered, reviewing evidence, debating, voting. The wait is excruciating for everyone involved. Families sit in courthouse hallways, silent, their eyes distant. Watson remains in custody, his expression unchanged. Finally, the jury returns. The courtroom fills quickly. Every seat is occupied. Silence descends as the jury foreman stands. Guilty. The word lands like a physical blow. Ben's mother gasps quietly. Olivia's father closes his eyes, his jaw working. Watson's face does not change. He stares straight ahead, his hands resting on the table before him. Justice Herron asks if the verdict is unanimous. The foreman confirms. All 12 jurors have agreed. Scott Watson is guilty of murdering Ben Smart. Scott Watson is guilty of murdering Olivia Hope. Sentencing follows weeks later. Watson is given life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. Justice Herron's statement is measured. He acknowledges the seriousness of the crimes, the impact on the families, the need for public confidence in the justice system. Watson is led away. His family, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watches in silence. No outburst, no protest, only the quiet devastation of people who must now navigate years of appeals, prison visits, and public judgment. Outside, media surrounds the families. Ben's parents speak briefly, their words chosen carefully. They express relief that someone has been held accountable, but their relief is muted, incomplete. Without bodies, without full answers, closure remains elusive. Gerald Hope speaks more extensively. He thanks the police, the prosecutors, the jury, but his words carry an undertone of discomfort. Years later, he will admit to lingering questions about aspects of the investigation. For now, he focuses on the verdict as a step toward justice for his daughter. The public reaction mirrors the courtroom division. Some celebrate the conviction as appropriate, evidence-based, necessary. Others express unease. Newspaper opinion pieces question the boat mismatch, the hair handling, the reliance on evolving witness testimony. Legal experts weigh in. Some praise the prosecution for securing a conviction in a difficult case. Others critique the reliance on circumstantial evidence, warning that the case may become a flashpoint for debates about forensic standards and witness reliability. Watson begins his incarceration. He maintains his innocence. His case file grows as defense attorneys prepare appeals. The Marlborough Sounds return to their usual rhythm. Boats still anchor in Furno Lodge Bay every summer. Tourists still celebrate New Year's Eve. But the story lingers, a shadow over the water, a reminder that beneath the surface, some questions remain unanswered. Ben Smart and Olivia Hope remain missing. Their families cannot bury them, cannot visit graves, cannot perform the rituals that help the living process death. They exist in perpetual suspension. Grief without conclusion, loss without remains. The conviction provides a legal answer, but the human questions, where are they, what happened in those final moments, did the right person pay, those questions continue to haunt everyone touched by the case. Years will pass, appeals will be filed, new evidence will be sought, and the story will refuse to settle into simple resolution. The appeals begin almost immediately. Watson's defense team files motions, challenging various aspects of the trial. They argue that the hair evidence was improperly handled, that the identification procedures were suggestive, that the jury was prejudiced by media coverage. Each appeal is heard, considered, and ultimately denied. The conviction stands. The legal system, having rendered its verdict, is reluctant to overturn it without compelling new evidence. But outside the courtroom, the case continues to generate debate. Journalists revisit the evidence. Investigators who were not involved in the original inquiry examine the files. Documentary producers seek interviews, crafting narratives that question or defend the conviction. One persistent question involves the catch. Despite extensive searches, the two-masted wooden vessel with portholes and a blue stripe was never found. Some argue this proves it never existed, that witnesses were mistaken, that their descriptions were amalgamations of multiple boats. Others argue it proves the investigation focused on the wrong suspect, that the real mystery man escaped on the real mystery yacht, while police concentrated on Scott Watson. Private investigators occasionally resurface, claiming new leads. A boat reportedly matching the description is spotted in Australia. Another is found rotting in a hidden cove. Each lead is investigated and dismissed. The catch remains phantom, described in detail, but never confirmed. The hair evidence also attracts ongoing scrutiny. Forensic scientists not involved in the original case review the procedures. Some find no fault. Others raise concerns about the temporal proximity of the reference sample, processing, and the evidence sample analysis. The debate becomes technical, arcane, inaccessible to most observers, but it never fully resolves. Watson ages in prison. He participates in rehabilitation programs, maintains good behavior, but never wavers in proclaiming innocence. Parole hearings eventually begin. Each time, he is denied. The parole board cites the seriousness of the crimes and his continued refusal to accept responsibility. His refusal frustrates some, reassures others. To those convinced of his guilt, it proves his character, a man incapable of remorse. To those harboring doubt, it suggests genuine innocence, a man who cannot confess to something he did not do. Ben's and Olivia's families navigate decades with the case as a constant presence. Birthdays pass. Holidays arrive. Each year brings the same absence, the same unanswered questions. They age around the void, their lives shaped by loss that cannot be ritualized or fully mourned. Gerald Hope becomes a public figure associated with the case. He speaks to media occasionally, always carefully. His statements reflect complexity, gratitude for the conviction, but discomfort with unanswered questions. He wants to believe justice was served, but he also wants the full truth. Sometimes those desires align, sometimes they conflict. The public memory of the case becomes mythology, a story told and retold, details shifting slightly with each retelling. For some, it is a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in familiar places. For others, it is a warning about wrongful conviction, about how certainty can be constructed from fragments. New Zealand's legal community studies the case in classrooms and conferences. It becomes a reference point for discussions about circumstantial evidence, witness reliability, forensic protocols. Students analyze the trial transcripts, debating whether the verdict was correct. And beneath all the analysis, all the debate, all the years passing, two families wait for remains that never surface. Years stretch into decades. The calendar moves through the 2000s, then into the 2020s. The case recedes from front-page prominence but never disappears entirely. It exists in the cultural memory, referenced when similar cases arise, invoked in discussions about justice delayed or justice denied. In the mid-2020s, a renewed legal effort emerges. Nick Chisnell, KC, takes on Watson's case, bringing fresh eyes and modern forensic understanding to the evidence. He files a comprehensive appeal, challenging the reliability of the hair evidence with updated scientific standards, and questioning the identification procedures with contemporary psychological research on memory. The appeal is heard by a later Court of Appeal panel. The courtroom is once again filled, older now, some faces replaced by a new generation following the case through documentary films and podcasts. Watson, now graying, is present via video link from prison. Chisnell speaks with quiet precision. He outlines the contamination risks, the procedural concerns, the evolving scientific consensus about mitochondrial DNA matches. He presents expert testimony from forensic scientists who express reservations about the original conclusions. He does not claim definitive innocence. He claims reasonable doubt should have prevailed. The Crown is represented by Madeleine Larissy, whose demeanor is calm and professional. She acknowledges the challenges raised, but argues that the totality of evidence remains compelling. The hair, the identification, the opportunity, together, they form a sufficient basis for conviction. She reminds the court that juries see and hear witnesses directly, that appellate courts must defer to jury verdicts unless errors are clear and significant. The legal arguments are technical, dense with citations and precedent. But beneath the formality, the human stakes remain stark. Watson's potential freedom, the family's need for finality, the public's trust in judicial outcomes. Outside the courtroom, media coverage reignites. New documentaries premiere, examining the case with contemporary investigative techniques. One focuses on the boat search, using modern mapping to explore where the catch might have gone. Another interviews original witnesses, now decades older, asking how their memories have held or changed. Public opinion remains divided. Online forums debate endlessly. Some commenters present themselves as amateur forensic experts, others share personal theories. The case becomes a digital age mystery, crowdsourced and perpetually unresolved. The Court of Appeal deliberates for months. When the decision finally arrives, it is lengthy, carefully reasoned, and ultimately unchanged. The conviction is upheld. The court acknowledges the concerns raised, but finds insufficient grounds to overturn the jury's verdict. Watson will remain in prison. The decision is met with mixed reactions. Some see it as appropriate judicial restraint. Appellate courts should not second-guess juries without compelling reason. Others see it as institutional inertia, an unwillingness to admit possible error. Watson's legal options narrow. He remains in prison, his minimum non-parole period long since passed, but release repeatedly denied due to his continued insistence on innocence. The families continue their lives in the shadow of absence. Ben's parents have aged significantly. Olivia's father, Gerald Hope, remains vocal but weary. He has lived decades with the case, and the weight shows in his voice when he speaks publicly. He tells reporters he wants closure, but no longer knows what closure means. Does it require remains? Does it require certainty? Or is it simply the acceptance that some questions will never receive satisfying answers? The case, legally resolved, remains humanly unresolved. The story of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope becomes something larger than a single case. It becomes a lens through which New Zealand examines its justice system, its media practices, its collective memory. Academics study it. Psychologists analyze the witness identification procedures, using the case as a teaching example of how memory can be shaped by suggestion and repetition. The blink photo technique is debated. Some defend it as a legitimate tool, others condemn it as manipulative. Forensic scientists reference the hair evidence in discussions about laboratory protocols. Conferences feature presentations analyzing what went right or wrong in the evidence collection and analysis. Standards evolve, partly in response to cases like this one, where contamination concerns linger despite official denials. Legal scholars write about the case in journals and textbooks. It becomes a reference point for discussions about circumstantial evidence, about how much inference is too much, about where the line between proof and speculation properly lies. But beyond the professional analysis, the case persists in more personal spaces. Families living near the Marlborough Sounds still tell the story to visitors. Some point out where Furneaux Lodge sits, where the boats were anchored that New Year's Eve. The story becomes local lore, repeated with variations, details shifting slightly depending on who tells it. Ben and Olivia remain frozen at their ages, 21 and 17. Their photographs, circulated widely during the investigation, show them smiling, vibrant, alive. Those images are the public memory. No one knows what they would look like now, in their 40s, had they lived. Their families hold private memorials on anniversaries, no graves to visit, but spaces carved out in time to remember, to grieve, to acknowledge the lives that were interrupted. Friends who have stayed in touch gather occasionally, sharing memories, keeping the young versions of Ben and Olivia alive in story. Scott Watson continues his incarceration. He has spent more than 2 decades behind bars. His life has been shaped entirely by this conviction. His identity, his daily existence, his future, all defined by the verdict rendered in that courtroom. Whether guilty or innocent, he has paid an enormous price. His family continues to believe in his innocence. They visit when allowed. They maintain websites and social media presences, arguing his case. They point to the same inconsistencies that have always existed: the boat, the hair handling, the identification evolution. The Crown, represented through various prosecutors and officials over the years, maintains the conviction was correct. They argue that the evidence was sufficient, the trial fair, the verdict just. They point to the jury's decision, the appellate court's affirmation, the legal system's integrity, and between these positions, certainty of guilt, certainty of innocence, lies a vast middle ground occupied by people who simply do not know. They see compelling arguments on both sides. They recognize the tragedy, regardless of who was responsible. They understand that justice can be imperfect, even when pursued with good intentions. The Marlborough Sounds remain beautiful. Steep hills dropping to deep water, boats still gathering in summer, celebrations still marking the turn of each year. The location has not been tainted by the tragedy. Life continues there, visitors still come, the natural beauty persists. But the story lingers in the water, in the hills, in the memory of anyone who looks out over Furneaux Lodge Bay and thinks about that New Year's Eve, when two young people walked onto a yacht and vanished into silence. The case refuses final resolution. It exists in permanent suspension, legally concluded but humanly open, officially solved but publicly contested. This state of unresolved resolution defines its legacy. For some, this is the nature of justice in complex cases. Not every question can be answered. Not every doubt can be eliminated. The legal system requires decisions, even when evidence is incomplete. The jury's verdict represents the best judgment possible under difficult circumstances. For others, the unresolved elements represent failure, investigative tunnel vision, forensic carelessness, or premature certainty. They argue that doubt should have prevailed, that a man may be imprisoned for crimes he did not commit, that the real killer may have escaped entirely. Both positions contain elements of truth and assumption. The full truth, what actually happened in those hours after Ben and Olivia boarded the yacht, remains known only to those who were present. And some of those people are dead, or silent, or never existed in the way the story requires. Gerald Hope, now elderly, reflects on the decade since his daughter disappeared. In interviews, he speaks carefully, weighing his words. He says he believes the conviction was necessary, but admits to lingering discomfort with certain aspects of the investigation. He does not claim innocence for Watson, but he acknowledges the questions that persist. His honesty captures the complexity many feel. Justice is not binary. Conviction does not automatically equal truth, and the absence of conviction would not have provided peace either. It would simply have been a different kind of unresolved pain. Ben's family speaks less publicly. They have retreated into private grief, maintaining dignity through silence. Their loss is no less than Olivia's family's, but they have chosen a different path through it. Less engagement with media, less public processing. Both families share the same void. No remains, no closure, no final goodbye. They have navigated decades without the rituals that help humans process death. No burial, no gravestone, just absence stretching forward infinitely. The story appears periodically in true crime media. Podcasts dedicated to unsolved mysteries feature it, though technically it is solved. Documentary series revisit it, presenting evidence and interviews, allowing viewers to draw their own conclusions. Some productions lean toward Watson's guilt. Others emphasize reasonable doubt. Each retelling reshapes the story slightly. Details are emphasized or minimized depending on the narrative being constructed. The same facts can be arranged to support different conclusions. This is not deception, it is the nature of storytelling, the inevitable subjectivity in how events are presented and interpreted. Social media has given the case new life. Online communities dedicated to true crime discuss it endlessly. Amateur investigators present theories, some plausible, some fantastical. The case becomes a collaborative puzzle, with participants scattered globally, connected only by interest and internet access. Some of this engagement is thoughtful, adding genuine insight or raising valid questions. Some is exploitative, treating real tragedy as entertainment. The families watch from a distance, unable to control how their loss is used, discussed, or monetized. Watson continues to assert innocence. He has filed additional appeals, each denied. He has sought compassionate release as he ages, each request refused. The system that convicted him maintains its grip, unmoved by his protests or the public debate swirling around the case. And so the story continues, unfinished, unresolved, unable to rest. In the Marlborough Sounds, the water moves, as it always has, tides rising and falling, currents flowing between islands, the surface reflecting sky and hills in ever-changing patterns. The landscape remembers nothing. It simply exists, indifferent to human tragedy, played out within its boundaries. But humans remember. And memory, unlike water, does not flow smoothly. It catches on details, loops back to questions, refuses to settle into final form. The case of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope is now a historical event, studied by people who were not yet born when it happened. It exists in archives, in court records, in documentary footage, in the fading memories of those who were present. New Year's celebrations continue at Furneaux Lodge. Young people gather, just as Ben and Olivia did, unaware or barely aware of the story that unfolded there. Some locals mention it, pointing out the bay, sharing fragments of the narrative. Most visitors do not know. They enjoy the setting, the music, the company, the celebration, all the things Ben and Olivia were enjoying before everything changed. The case has become a marker of time's passage. Those who remember it vividly are aging. Those who investigate it now approach it as history, not current events. The emotional immediacy has faded for most, replaced by analytical distance. But for the families, time has not created distance. The loss remains fresh in its essential quality, even if the sharp edges have been worn smooth by years of carrying it. They have learned to live around the void, but the void persists. Gerald Hope sometimes visits the sounds. He looks out over the water, imagining the night, the boats, the moment when his daughter stepped onto the yacht. He does not know what he hopes to find in these visits. Perhaps it is simply being near the last place she was seen. Perhaps it is maintaining connection across the unbridgeable gap between living and lost. Ben's family has their own private rituals, their own ways of remembering. They speak his name. They share stories from before. They keep him alive in the only way available to them, through memory, through love that persists beyond death. Scott Watson marks time in prison differently. His days are structured by institutional routine, his years measured in parole hearings and denied appeals. Whether innocent or guilty, he has lost most of his adult life to incarceration. The question of justice applies to him too, regardless of which side of guilt he occupies. The question that haunts the case, did the right person pay, cannot be answered with certainty by anyone not present in those final hours. And perhaps not even by those who were present, if memory and truth have diverged, as they often do. What remains is the story itself, told and retold, examined and debated, a permanent feature of New Zealand's cultural landscape. It is a story about loss, about uncertainty, about the limits of justice and knowledge. It is a story that refuses to end because it was never fully told. The beginning is known, the conclusion, legal conviction, is known. But the middle, the actual events that transform two living young people into permanent absence, remains hidden. And so the story continues, unfinished, like a sentence without final punctuation, suspended in perpetual inconclusiveness. The final truth of what happened to Ben Smart and Olivia Hope rests somewhere beneath the surface, literal or metaphorical, physical or epistemological. It exists in a space the living cannot access, protected by death, by water, by time, by the fundamental limitations of human knowing. The case will generate more documentaries, more appeals, more debate. Each generation will discover it anew, bring fresh perspectives, apply contemporary standards. The story will be reinterpreted through evolving understandings of forensic science, criminal psychology, media influence, systemic bias. But the essential mystery will remain. Two people vanished. Their bodies were never found. A man was convicted on circumstantial evidence that some find compelling and others find insufficient. The legal system rendered its verdict. The human question persists. This is the nature of certain stories. They resist resolution not because facts are absent, but because facts alone cannot satisfy the human need for understanding. We want to know not just what happened, but why, how, what it means, and those deeper questions often exceed what evidence can answer. Ben and Olivia exist now primarily as symbols of youth interrupted, of mysteries unsolved, of the gap between legal conclusions and human certainty. Their real selves, their full complexity as individuals, have been reduced to photographs and basic biographical facts. The investigation focused on their disappearance, not their lives. The story remembers their loss more than their existence. This is perhaps the greatest tragedy, that they are known primarily for how they died or disappeared, rather than for how they lived. Their identities have been subsumed by the case bearing their names. Their families work against this. They keep private memories alive. They remember Ben's laugh, Olivia's smile, the small daily details that made them specific rather than generic victims. But these memories are personal, fragile, not part of the public record. The public knows the case. The families know the people. The gap between these forms of knowing is unbridgeable. As decades pass, as those who remember Ben and Olivia personally pass away, The case will remain, but the people will fade further into abstraction. Eventually, they will exist only as names in a legal file, faces in archived photographs, subjects of a story told to illustrate points about justice or injustice. This is the fate of all but the most carefully preserved memories. Time erodes individual detail, leaving only broad strokes, simplified narratives, symbolic meaning. But for now, while people who loved them still live, Ben and Olivia remain more than symbols. They remain loss felt daily, absence that shapes lives, grief that time has not eliminated. And the water of the Marlborough Sounds continues its movement, indifferent, beautiful, holding whatever secrets lie beneath its surface, in depths that resist all searching, all questioning, all human need for answers. The story ends where it began, in silence, in water, in mystery. The legal case is closed, the human case remains open, and the truth, whatever it is, stays hidden in the space between what was proven and what is known. Some stories conclude, some simply stop, leaving everything unresolved. This is one of the latter, a story that will be told as long as people remember to tell it, never finding its ending because the ending was lost the same night Ben and Olivia were. The Marlborough Sounds keep their secrets, the families keep their grief, the nation keeps its questions, and time keeps moving forward, carrying the story with it, incomplete, unfinished, and perhaps unfinishable.